Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Like the clubs I work with and I have a regular arrangement with, we talk about trying to create athletes as well as gymnasts. So in order to do that, you need to be doing something outside of gymnastics in terms of like that general prep work. But like you said, it's never losing sight of what the reason for doing that general prep work is for, which is that we always come back to the sport. So, is what we're doing affecting the gymnast? Because if it isn't, it's not relevant. And then, the other one is obviously, it used to be that there was a very clear line of you would do this and then we'll do this. And what I try and do is just try and blur the lines. So when I do like a 6-hour visit, for example, I'm there for the full 6 hours. Whether that's the physical prep warm-up, whether that's the gymnastics warm-up, whether that's watching them do technical skills and standing side by side with the coach, all the way to, the last 45 minutes, hour of the day where I do my general prep work with them. Because it's all physical preparation. Therefore, as an SSE coach, my opinion is you should be involved in a lot of it. What I mean by involved is there's bits where you lead, and then there's bits where you very much are just there to support if required. So standing there and just watching and absorbing and offering an opinion if asked, or trying to problem solve with the coaches or what other support staff are there. So it's that was my thing very quickly, is it was trying to just expand and push and blur the edges of what that black and white was to as much grey as possible of what my involvement is. And the reason I'm involved is because it gives me a bigger picture of what's going on. So I'm always trying to learn more myself. And the only way I'm going to learn more is obviously by sort of putting myself more and more into the sport, but also it's vital to work with the coaches that you're working with. This isn't a siloed approach. Like I don't just go in and work on my own and then drive home at the end of the day. Like I work side by side with the coaches that I work with. And I'm really fortunate because the coaches I work with obviously want me to be there. But they're also really open to the idea of having that hybrid model. So when they're really open to that idea, there's just less barriers for entry. So they want to implement it. They're open to suggestion. And then it's just a case of finding a way that works the best to make sure that the gymnasts, and it's an athlete-centered thing at the end of the day, are getting the most out of it. Yeah, I just think if you have to use the word force in anything, it's not, that completely defeats the objective of having a coaching relationship and being support staff. And, it's a two-way thing. Like from a technical coach point of view, I think it's really important to be really open-minded to this stuff, which I think is amazing. I think it's definitely happening a lot more. But then from an SSE coach point of view, it's remembering what your role is. And it comes from a place of enthusiasm that you end up doing too much or you try and get too involved, or, it comes from a good place, but actually you always have to bring it back to, as an SSE coach, like what is your role within that club? Each role is different within each club, I would probably say. But at the end of the day, you fall under the category of support staff. So, there's a head coach that everyone works around as opposed to down from, but around. And then you're there to truly support it using the knowledge and the sort of specific skills that you have. So yes, you can write the best the best strength program in the world, but also like, what else can you do? Like, what else can you offer? So you would think as an SSE coach, you would have some good idea of like some kinetic chain principles. If you do, you can probably help an athlete get better overhead. So if you can help an athlete get better overhead, you're going to probably be a coach's best friend.
Yeah.
So, or if you can get them to, open their hips a little bit more, similarly. So now you're starting to use your knowledge in a way that is actually supportive, right? You're impacting the athlete. All the coach cares about is the athlete improving and doing it in a healthy manner. So, we're not just there to teach them to like stand up and down with weights. That's a big part of what we do, and it's really fundamental, and I'm never going to stop doing it. But also we have other strings to our bow that we can certainly use, and it's just how do you use that in that unique environment? And that's why I have what I call that integrated approach. So standing side by side with the coach and rolling our sleeves up and helping out best we can.
Quick. Yeah. So what would you do in those 3 months between the summer and between the actual meet season that we're living in now?
Yeah. So you start to bridge it, like you said. So it's not like flicking light switches on and off. It's a blend. So you're still doing some strength work, but the volume of it isn't isn't anywhere near as high as possible. So I do start to pull it back a little bit in the sense of we want them a little bit fresher. But then I do start to look at trying to lay that building blocks of some rate of force development. So we know that that takes time to develop stiffness, and there are a lot of things that come before it. So I start to lay the foundation of, are we doing some isometric work? Are we doing some jumping and landing? Are we doing some speed strength work that is not really classed as plyo, but it is definitely classed as power work? And we're sort of trying to get us ready for competition time. So yeah, that's the route I take with it, is we just pull everything out a little bit, but we're still training and we're still building. And that is definitely the point, but it's not as carefree because there's more considerations from my side and there's more considerations from the head coach.
Yeah. And can you maybe share a little bit of insight into why it might not look like you're doing anything in some of these power sessions? Because I think sometimes coaches are like, the hell did I hire you for? They're standing around for 7 of the 10 minutes.
Yeah, you're going to cause a riot, aren't you? Yeah, it's understandable because they do just look like they're sitting around. But actually what you're doing is, within the work, we're looking at speed of movement. I want that athlete to move quickly because what's the purpose of it? I'm trying to develop rate of force development. So that movement therefore has to be quick in order to send the right signal through. This is such crude science, but I'm going to go for it. I'm sticking with it, Dave. But then, if I get them to do 25 of those, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to slow down. So is that the aim or the principle of what I'm trying to get out of it? It probably isn't. So I pick a rep range where I know that they can repeat it and the speed of movement is where I need it. In my opinion, 3 to 5. Okay. Just kind of what the literature says, that after 3, we kind of slow down, but we can creep it to 5 if we're brave. We can go a bit more if we're even braver. Okay. But then we need some rest because the next set, I need that speed to be back, because that's the idea of what we're trying to achieve. So what we do is we then just take a breather. So, and what I mean by that is we use the principle of rest in order for the system to recover. So then the athlete has the energy to then be able to produce the same amount of force at the same rate again. And then that way we're training a physical quality that is going to help the gymnast to get better. So it always comes back to, why are we doing this? So we're trying to develop a powerful gymnast. Cool. Well, let's give them a little bit of rest. So then their next set can be quick. So then they can develop the power. Right from the beginning is your role has changed. It's competition time. So you're not steering the ship as much physically. What you're trying to do is ensure that output remains high. So we are doing some plyo work, but we're using it sparingly at the right times. We are touching on some tissue conditioning to make sure that they're remaining healthy and not just fully detraining like during this time period. And then it's also just, my role has changed. So am I spending a little bit more time one-on-one with gymnasts doing what we would look at like an MOT or a service? So is everything still good? Is anything starting to get a little bit achy or sore, or are we losing range in certain areas that's causing an issue? Because if it is, we can give you specific work-ons to do, because the rest of your physical prep work potentially isn't as super, super intense. So we're trying to just fine-tune the athlete at the time and the squad as a whole of what we're doing. So are there little bits and bobs that we can be doing to create some more rotation and help us out so we remain healthier? Because that competition time is so intense for gymnast and coach. And then, are we trying to keep that output? So we've worked all this time period. Don't just stop and think that they're going to hold it forever, because they're not. What you got to do is try and find the opportunities within that period of comp to sprinkle in a bit of stimulus to try and keep everything as high as possible to give them the best possible outcome of being successful. So it changes a little bit. You've got to be a little bit more tactful about how you go about things. You've got to spend a lot more time one-on-one with the gymnasts and make sure that you've spent time creating relationships with them so that they tell you what is sore or what they maybe need a little bit of help with. And similarly to the coach. So when you go in, you sort of get given a list of, could you have a look at X, Y, and Z with so-and-so, because this is what I'm seeing, or this is what I've been told. So the things that you do just change. I like this time because it's very detail orientated. So I get to be a little bit nerdy. And again, because you spent time standing side by side by the coach, you don't just feel like you're standing there twiddling your thumbs now because you've always done it.
Yeah.
You're just getting to watch them do what they do best, which is routines and do skills and refine things. So actually, it's a really nice period to be involved in, and I actually feel very privileged to be part of it, because it would be very easy for them to be like, you not necessarily need to be here as long, but because you offer value in other areas of what we do, we love you to be here. So, you know, you create that opportunity for yourself to be there and witness that. But it's such a privilege to just watch them. Then, you know, you've seen someone learn a skill, and now you're seeing them string it together in a full routine. And I think that's just like the reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Yep.
And that just drills home, if I ever do lose sight of what it is I'm trying to do, is it's not really about the numbers, it's about what they're doing.
Sure.
And then I'll go to competitions and watch as well for the exact same reason. There's nothing more important to this gymnast right now than this, so I'll always try and get to a couple within the year as well.
Sure.
There's always low-hanging fruit that's really simple to get. So you know, I'll never try and go into somewhere and just make wholesale changes, because a lot of the stuff that they're doing is correct. So, and I think the worst mistake you can make as an S&C coach when you go in somewhere is change everything, because what you're basically telling that person who has lovingly put that program together is that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Which actually, a lot of the time, it really isn't. There's some really good stuff being done.
Yeah.
So sit back and watch is my first bit of advice. So if you're going to be there long term, why are you trying to change everything within 3 weeks? Is it because you know you're not going to be there long term?
Yep.
So watch and figure out what they're doing well. What can I maybe help with? What's the easy stuff to help with? So make a list of, these are the areas that I think could do with potentially changing or doing a little bit differently. Cool. Then make that list into which one of these are really accessible for me to make change to without causing any cause for concern. Get those done first. They will make an impact if you've made the right decision and you've implemented the right things. Then you've started to get a little bit of buy-in, and then you just move on to the next bit on the list, and the next bit on the list, and then the next bit on the list. And then before you know it, that you're building the trust with the coach. And it's really important, because it is actually earned. It's not just, oh, you're here, therefore I now should have the respect of you. You're naive to think if you don't go into a gym club, they're not watching you to see whether you're making a change or not. And you'll soon find out if you're not. So, because you won't be there. So, but yeah, that's the way, is just try not to make wholesale changes. You know, if you have these big plans of grandeur about making really big changes, change one thing a year for 5 years. If you want to think that way. So, you know, I've been at certain clubs for 3 years now. Sadly, one of them was during COVID. But, you know, we would maybe make one big change per year. But actually now we've had 3 fairly decent, significant changes at those clubs that I've been at for a year. And it's come as no shock or surprise, because we've discussed it for a year before it happens. And then we've discussed it for a year before it happens. So, yeah, that's my advice to the S&C coaches, that if that's how you were to do it, is just pick the things you know you can change that aren't going to cause like massive sort of conflict too quickly. And then, you know, that the higher conflict stuff maybe comes a little bit later down the line. But what you'll find is the stuff that you thought would cause conflict, if you have a good working relationship after a while, doesn't really cause conflict once they trust you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jack. It's the same the other way around, isn't it? If you work with a physiotherapist or you know, like I'm like with a head coach, is you just learn to trust each other more, don't you? The more time you spend and the more results you get, you just back each other more. So it's like, okay, you've explained it to me, I probably need to see it, show me, and we'll see, and we can reflect and go on it.